Welcome, everyone. I am Dr. Anita Leffel. I am the Dean of the Masters of Social Impact program at Claremont Lincoln University. Claremont Lincoln University is an online university. It happens to be located here in Claremont. Yes, we are located right here. There's not only 5 Claremont universities, but there happen to be 6. And we are the graduate program online. We are here at the Hive. This most fantastic place that you've ever been to. It reminds me of an area where you can come and think and plan and prepare yourself for some really great collaboration. And that's what we're doing today, is we're doing some collaboration. So let me first introduce Andiken. Andiken is with the Hive, and let him tell you just briefly about the Hive, and then I will introduce the rest of the people and our guest speaker, and we'll continue. Andiken?
Okay. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good night. I'm Andiken. I'm one of the postbacks here at the Hive, and just a brief bit of information about the Hive. Like Anita said, the Hive is a great, dope place. We do a lot of different things. One of them is we teach classes here. So right there is Fred Leichner, who's the director of the Hive. He teaches a class on human-centered design thinking. We also have spaces for other people to teach classes, faculty across the 5 Cs. Also a space for things like this to happen. We have a bunch of different workshops on everything from social entrepreneurship to Sharpie art to immigration. And then lastly, we're a space where students can come in, if you look over there, can come in, do work for class, student groups, just hang out, use the space. There's a lot of different uses of this space. We have a lot of different rooms that have a lot of different capabilities. I hope you enjoy your time here at the workshop, and I hope you come by the Hive to check out the other things we have to offer. With that, I hope everybody has a great time, and we'll take it back to Anita.
Thank you. So what's so nice is that we're collaborating, and that's what this evening is about, is collaboration, change, and how do you produce change, and how do you work together. And so let me just introduce, we have a number of individuals that are online, and they're coming in through Zoom, and they happen to be, most of them happen to be our students who are located all over the country. We do have students that are all over the world, but these students are all over the country. We have the director who is responsible for all of the students. She sort of cracks that whip and makes sure that they stay in line. And we have Claire, who's also working with Heather to help our students make it through. We believe that being online doesn't mean that you're just sent out there and to do your thing, but we do have real people on the ground to help individuals who are online. We have some of our students, we have a couple of our students who are present as well. And so we have 3 sponsors. We have the Hive, we have Claremont Lincoln University, we have, actually there's 4, and we have Net Impact. Any of you on the ground have heard of Net Impact? Yes? You used to have an organization here on your campus called Net Impact. I haven't seen that it's being active. It's something that you might want to look into. It is a national organization. There is a side of the Net Impact that is professionals. Our local chapter would be LA. And then there are collegial organizations. We are the first, Claremont Lincoln University happens to offer the first Net Impact that's online. Now think about that. How do you have a student organization that's meeting online? Well, here you go. Come on in, please. Hi. And so our fourth sponsor is really Ashoka. And we teach about Ashoka. I would assume that many of you have heard of Ashoka, an organization founded to help develop change makers all over the world. They are making a little twist now, I noticed, and our speaker is going to talk more about that. But what I've noticed on the website, just watching the changes, is that they're expecting all of us to be leaders, to be change makers. In other words, we can be change makers in our own communities, but we have to be leaders to be change makers as well. And I think that our speaker is going to be speaking more about that in a minute. So welcome to our students on Zoom. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for being here and coming here. And now let me introduce to you our speaker. Now, we were talking, she sent me this long, bios, I could sit here and stand here and read the bio to you. But as we were coming over here, and I'd met her before, and I think what was quite interesting is that I heard a little bit of an accent, but I couldn't quite tell what it was, because she's just, I thought, okay, well, she just has this professional accent. It turns out that she's from really a number of places. She was born in one place in Mexico City. She went to school in Spain. She studied in France. She's lived in a number of other countries. And I asked her as we were walking up the stairs to the Hive, is this the reason that you are with Ashoka? And she says, absolutely. She said, I really saw, and I'll let her tell you more, but I really saw and felt, and now I know that this is what I need to be doing. So Lorena Garcia Duran is the director of the
Ashoka Support Network.
Ashoka Support Network. And she was in Miami, built up a phenomenal Ashoka organization there. And I don't know if you know of this, and I encourage you to go back and check this out. Ashoka has Ashoka universities, Ashoka campuses. And she's been over some of that as well, responsible for some of that as well. But we're not a Ashoka campus because we're online. But we are doing the same thing that Ashoka campuses do, which I told her we should still be recognized for that because we are doing change makers. We are producing change makers. But you here in this room and online can really hear more about what Ashoka is doing. Yes, it's worldwide, but what it's going to be doing right here in our own community. So let me recognize Lorena. Thank you, Lorena, for coming.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I've never been on the offline. So let me tell you a little bit of who I am. I think it'll make a lot of sense to you more than the traveling, what happened. So I grew up in Mexico City in a house where I realized, probably around 10, that the people that I loved the most, the people that I was closest, was not my family, was actually the people that worked at my home. And every time that I got closer, my parents didn't like that, especially my mom. So they would fire them. And I grew up with this constant understanding that people were abandoning me, especially the people that I loved the most. So when I was about 10, I realized what was happening. And I confronted my family. And ever since, let's say that I love my family, but I've always been the weirdo in the family. I've always been asking a lot of questions, and I've always had an urge for justice. Now, in the context of Mexico, I wanted to be a lawyer. That meant, and now I'm gonna also say that in this country and many other countries, that doesn't necessarily mean the pursuit of justice. So I got a little bit disappointed and decided to go for audiovisual documentaries and say, okay, through documentaries, I'm going to change what's happening to my country and whatnot. As you can imagine, as soon as I could, I got a sponsorship out of my house, convinced my parents that I needed to get out of there and that I needed to see the world. So I went to France, where I had a lot of fun and didn't study that much, but I studied the culture, right? And the party and their understandings and who I was and whatnot. And it was, frankly, made me who I am today. Went back to Mexico, couldn't stand it. And as soon as I could, I got another sponsorship from my parents to go and study cinematography in Spain. And there I got married, learned a lot of things, not necessarily in college, but in life. And when I got back to Mexico, actually right before I got back to Mexico, my best friend that was studying at Tufts University immigration law called me and she said, I know what you're gonna do with the rest of your life. You have to get on, at that time, Alta Vista. You probably don't know what I'm talking about, but it was the searcher then. Google social entrepreneurship and Google an organization named Ashoka, and I'm gonna mail you a book that is called what is it called? How to Change the World?
Yeah.
Yes, How to Change the World by David Bornstein. And she did. I always confess this to everybody that I only read the first 2 chapters, but I was hooked. And I decided that that was what I was going to do with my life. And at the end of the day, I ended up knocking on the doors of Ashoka in Mexico City, and I said, you have to hire me. And I was coming from the private sector. I had already worked for my dad, for my family business and whatnot. I was very young. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I did not like what I was doing. I knew that I needed to find a way where the business concept of let's be very strict, let's get results, let's be very, very focused on goals, had to apply into solving the problems of the world, had to apply to my 10-year-old self that said, this is not okay. I disagree. This is not fine. Something has to change. And that something has to change. I wasn't happy with the concept of, ooh, an NGO is going to do something about it, or an organization is going to take care about it, or, or maybe a judge, or maybe, no, there was something in me that was kind of building a connection between the business concepts, the creativity, the thrive of the business entrepreneurship world, and I want justice. So, long story short, I entered Ashoka. Now, what is Ashoka? And the interesting thing about this is that because social entrepreneurship now is in everybody's minds, thankfully, there's a lot of misconceptions of what actually is. And the word entrepreneurship hasn't helped, because entrepreneurship sounds like enterprise. Entrepreneurship has nothing to do with enterprise, but venture, which means starting or creating something. However, social entrepreneurship, if you read in the media, if you Google it very quickly, it tends to fall into, maybe it's a business that does social, maybe it's Tom's Shoes. Well, according to us, absolutely not. We're fine. It's good. It's good that everybody's talking about it. It's good that the conversation is out there. That was exactly the point when Ashoka was created. So let me give you history. The guy that invented Ashoka was an American, graduated from Yale and Harvard and all of that. But more importantly, he was an anthropologist, a sociologist. He was obsessed with civil rights movements. He was following Mahatma Gandhi. He was following Maya Angelou. He was huge, huge fanatic of these movements. However, he was an adult by then, and I'm talking about early 70s, and McKinsey, he was working for McKinsey, and McKinsey sends him to India. And as a typical foreigner, he was, backpack, and where am I? And a little bit, afraid, and I'm going to say the gringo word, and they're like, what am I doing here? And he started doing a very interesting research, which many years later became the basics of Ashoka, which was he realized that there was a certain type of human being that he had first identified as a social entrepreneur that were finding opportunity in problem, that were the ones that kind of figuring out a way where the community could be empowered enough to solve their own problems. And that individual was defined as a social entrepreneur. And many years later, again, that paper gave him the MacArthur Genius Grant, $1 million, and he starts Ashoka. Now, the whole idea of Ashoka is, how do we create a better world for everyone? And at that moment, Bill Drayton, the founder, thought, well, the best way to do that is if we find this super social entrepreneurs and we support them and we make sure that they accomplish what they need to accomplish. And that made sense for a long time. But as Anita said, there has been a shift. And the interesting part of it is that we as an organization, we are not about us. We are an organization that is completely committed, and we have to change the world. So if we have to change the world, and what we thought in 1980 doesn't apply anymore, or there's a different interpretation about it, then we have to evolve. And that's what happened to Ashoka. So we have moved from the organization that started the movement of social entrepreneurship and was all about social entrepreneurship to an organization that now believes that the world should be a world where everyone can and is a change maker. And I'll explain. But let me go back to what is a social entrepreneur, because most of the times, again, you find a lot of understandings of who these people are, I think it's very important to understand what we meant when we started explaining who these people are, because it makes a lot of sense. It is through them that we realize that the best way to create a better world is by empowering a massive community of change makers. They taught us that. Why? A social entrepreneur is like any other entrepreneur. That's where entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship, yes, is exactly the same thing, which means creativity, thrive, drive, even an obsession. You get 100 doors knock on your face, you have this wonderful idea, and nobody believes that you have a great idea. You get a kick out of that. You like that. Oh, all right, it isn't? So then I'm gonna knock on another billion. So that creativity of an entrepreneur, but what moves this individual is completely, absolutely, without question, a social purpose. I like to say that if you put in a blender a Bill Gates and a Mahatma Gandhi or a Mother Teresa and a Bill Gates in a blender, boom, you get a smoothie of a social entrepreneur. What I mean by that is that imagine the brain of a Bill Gates. Imagine that capacity, that creativity, but the tenacity of a Mother Teresa, the heart of a Mother Teresa, the intentions, the right agenda. There's no way to corrupt her. There's no way to, you are maybe interested in the Nobel Peace Prize. No, she isn't. So our social entrepreneurs combine that. Let's call that the basic DNA. The creativity of the entrepreneur with the unquestionable ethical fiber. That's how we call it, okay? Now, there's a lot of people like that around the world. Now, the ones that we support, the ones that we put a stamp behind them, are the ones that have done their homework. What do I mean by this? They've studied the problem. They understand what they're talking about. They can really articulate what is causing the problem, and therefore have a better capacity to come up with the best solution towards that problem. I'll give you a very clear example. Remember Haiti, the earthquake. Right. What happened immediately after the earthquake? It was, I'm going to talk about, I can't leave my coffee there, right? What I'm going to talk about is an approach to the problem, right? So Haiti, a poor country with a lot of struggle, has a terrible earthquake. There are three types of approaching that in terms of social action. One is the activists. Media and activist organizations make sure that every single one of us and every single human being that has access to a TV, we know, we are aware. There's something horrible happening in this country. Oh my God. Awareness. Do they do something about it? Sometimes, rarely. Some have been doing lobbying, some become more activist and actually put themselves in front of the whale. There's a certain level of action between it, but their purpose isn't to solve the problem. It's to create awareness about it, right? Then you have, unfortunately, and I'll explain why, the vast majority of the rest of people, organizations, governments, institutions that do good on this earth. They're the vast majority of this approach, which is, I feel terrible, I'm gonna do something about it. And that is a reaction, which means there's a child starving, I'm gonna feed the child. There's a family without a roof, I'm gonna put a roof on top of the family. Now, even though, let's not question the intentions, let's say that all of these intentions are fantastic, nice, good, they come out of good heart. Unfortunately, and this is not new to a lot of us, that has become part of the problem. Because when you address something as a reaction and just start feeding people or putting roofs on top, or vaccines, that kind of takes care of the problem for a little while. But if you keep doing it, you're going to perpetuate a deeper problem. And you can see it in almost every place in the Southern Hemisphere of the world, including in the United States, and so forth. And if you look at Haiti, that's exactly what happened. Immediately after everybody knew, there goes Red Cross, UNICEF, and all of the other organizations. We all react out of pain and jump in there. Many years later, Haiti goes into a bigger crisis, a crisis that has a lot more to do with history, with lack of civic engagement, with corruption, that had nothing to do with an earthquake. And now they had an extra problem, which was there had been a continuous flow of throwing things to the people instead of an understanding of why. So, but of course, I'm not criticizing the approach, because we still are going to always, as humanity, will always need someone to react immediately and just feed somebody and let's make sure that things continue, sort of. But that is not controlled, and it should be controlled, right? Now then we come to the approach of social entrepreneurships. What these people do is they take their time. And again, you know, to credit to the rest of them, you can't take that much time when someone's starving and dying. Of course, you still need the organization to come in and feed. And that will actually allow social entrepreneurs to take their time, to study why. Why was Haiti in that situation? It wasn't because of an earthquake. What caused it, right? So the social entrepreneur comes in. They studied the background. They study the history. They study, more importantly, and this is where entrepreneurship comes in, what else has been done? Where else in the world? What has worked? What hasn't worked? And therefore have come up with a most innovative approach to that problem. Now, innovation is key for us, because when you have something new, you're a risk. Someone needs to believe in you. You're a crazy person. And that's good for us, because if it actually works, that means that that idea or that solution has the capacity to pollinate around the world, has the capacity to go to every single other place in the world where the problem is similar. So innovation for us is top, top, top. Usually that's where the vast majority of our candidates do not pass, the innovation component. Then it has to be a systemic approach. And I'll take a little bit of time on this one, because this is probably, to me, the most interesting one and probably the most complex one. Systemic approach is connected to the story of Haiti. A solution to somebody starving is not feeding them. A solution to a lot of people, millions of people starving, is not feeding them. It's figuring out, why are they starving? What caused it? Is there a way to figure out where the people that are starving, could they come up with the best solution? Well, guess what? The vast majority of social entrepreneurs come from the problem that they're solving. That is not, you know, a casualty. It is, there's a lot of reasoning behind that. If you understand the problem because you've lived it, aren't you the most capable one of solving it? I'm already starting to talk about change making, but I'll get there. So when I talk about systemic change, I'm talking about changing things in a way that a president or a moment of life cannot get rid of it. So I'm talking about changing mindsets. I'm talking about changing cultures. I'm talking about introducing policies that won't be able to throw away, because those policies have been adopted by the people for the people. I'm talking about products and services that have never been in access to the majority of the people that are suffering that problem. And therefore, if you introduce that product and service, you are changing by a systemic approach. So that is the systemic solution. And that is why from all of the social entrepreneurs in the world, we have only found 3,300 and plus in 37 years. Wow. Because it is very important to make sure that it's a systemic approach, that you are solving that problem. Again, I'm not talking about change making. I'm talking about social entrepreneurs. And the last one that I'm going to say here is sustainability. And this one is probably the one that has the biggest amount of misinterpretations. We're not talking about a for-profit. We are completely agnostic about the financial model that a social entrepreneur picks. Now, why? A lot of people, the Tom's Shoes movement will tell you, but isn't it more interesting and more sustainable that they actually create a company and they make a lot of money? Well, it depends. It depends on the country. It depends the solution. It depends on the problem. There are many non-for-profits that are way more profitable than a for-profit. It depends who runs it, how they do it, where under one context. We have a lot of social entrepreneurs that actually started with a for-profit and are now creating non-for-profits, because guess what? Government grants in some countries could actually make sure that that organization continues in a sustainable way. So to be honest, it doesn't matter. It's a trend. And maybe in 10 years, it will completely be disrupted again. It already has been disrupted. All of the social entrepreneurs that were elected in the last 2 years in Chile, they were all 100% B Corps. We are agnostic, which means that the vast majority of the applications were B Corps. Now, that could be a trend. It's a hip thing. Young people, they like it. It makes sense. Of course, you're making a decision for the rest of your life. What are you going to do with your life? And you have a passion to solve a problem, and at the same time, you can actually make money out of it. It's brilliant, of course, but it is a trend. And we are not going to change our criteria, because we know for 37 years that it really doesn't matter. It's about the other ones. It's about if you have the right entrepreneur person with the right intentions, right, the right ethical, that has really done their homework and therefore come up with the most innovative solution that is a systemic solution and that is sustainable. And again, what we mean by sustainability is they have a plan. They know where they're going. They totally see where that problem has been solved. They can see it, they can explain it, and they have a plan how to get there. Those are the guys that we call social entrepreneurs. If you want to know who they are, they're all in our website. You can see the list. You can actually use the directory to click by country, by issue, etc., etc. Now, I want to really not talk about them, even though I've spent a long time talking about them. Who I really want to talk about is a change maker. And I'll make my case. After, I'm going to say 25 years, 20 to 25 years of studying these people, right? 1980, we find our first one. But 20 years later, we could see, no other organization in the world had that privilege to see who these people are in a massive scale from an eye point of view. Who are they? What are they doing? Is there a common denominator amongst these people besides the criteria that we elect them with? Do they have trends? Are they moving depending on where they are, what age, et cetera, et cetera? And we realized many ahas. One of them, this is very interesting, 100% of these individuals have a very acute level of empathy when they address the problem that they're trying to solve. Let me explain. What that means is, I'm not talking about people that walk on top of the water. I'm not talking about their general ethics. I'm talking about a skill that they have been trained with, either by their families when they were children, or by life, or by the problem that they are so obsessed in solving, which means they have a much better understanding of who is suffering that problem and how can you actually solve that one. And that is empathy. So number one, oh my God, that is not a coincidence. 100% of these people have an acute level of empathy. Number two, the level of the capacity, or if they could be measured by their level of their success, my apologies, could be measured by their capacity of finding very unique type of people in the places where they work. Guess who that is? Who we have identified as change makers. What do I mean by this? Let's go down to reality. If there's a problem going on in the neighborhood next to us, there's poverty going on, and someone has come up with an idea on how to solve that problem. Most likely, you're gonna find a woman in the community that is a leader in the community, that she's respected by her neighbors, that she came up with this idea, that she's going to help everybody in the neighborhood to take care of Juanita, who lives in this house and is suffering in poverty and she's about to be homeless. It's actually about this lady. It's not about necessarily the social entrepreneur that understood that read about it, that studied about it. It was actually the capacity of the social entrepreneur to find all of these ladies in a very good amount of place and say, oh my God, ladies, we have a solution to this problem. Let's all gather, let's make it happen. When you see organizations that work, it's never about the CEO, never. It has nothing to do with that CEO in terms of application. He or she can be the visionaire. They can have the idea, but it's actually about their capacity of engaging certain unique people. People like you and I who decide to do something about it. That when we hear this is not okay, we listen. Oh, yeah, I agree. That's not okay. When I told my story about my own life, I saw the reactions in your face. You don't agree. Poor me at my 10-year-old. I don't like that. And I'm pretty sure that if I would have had a chance to talk to you when I was 10 years old and tell you what was happening to me, there's someone that differentiates you. A, would you have offered me help? Would you have tried? Or you wouldn't you? And I saw your eyes. You would have all helped me. And what we understand by that is that in order for a social entrepreneur to actually accomplish the goal of solving a problem in a massive scale, they will only do it if every single one of us understands our power to create change. If we all understand what's the role, what's up to me? Are we going to leave it to this 3,300 individuals around the world? Well, guess what? Their model, how it applies, doesn't apply if we don't participate. It's actually based on our participation, all of them. From the man that trained a rat on how, I don't know if you've seen some examples of social entrepreneurs from Ashoka, but I'll give you some examples. And I'll actually give you an example from here. And I'm sure you've heard of Andy Lipkis, the tree people. He's trying to solve completely the drought of LA and California. And one of his most interesting ideas is that he is organizing the community to protect the trees, not the trees, the tree outside of my house. I care about this one. I don't want it to. So he organized who? The change makers in each neighborhood to get up and stand up for the tree in their neighborhood. Not in the Amazonas, not in, North Forest, whatever, not in Sequoia, but in their neighborhood. You have people like Cristina Fiallo. And this one, it'll make my case, and then we'll do our exercise. Cristina Fiallo is a lawyer, young lawyer, immigrant from Portugal. And Cristina Fiallo realized how the immigration detention system worked in the United States. And guess what? She obviously didn't like it and decided to do something about it. She partnered with another young lawyer and created Civic End Isolation. Now, what Civic End Isolation does is two things. One is they are creating a national network of people that go to the immigration detention centers, knock on the door, and ask to visit someone inside of the immigration detention center. And I'll explain why. That is so awesome. The other thing that they're doing is they're doing lobbying. Let me break it down. In the United States of America, if you are detained by ICE or a police officer and you end up in an immigration detention center, the likelihood that it is a private detention center is huge. It's actually over 50%. And what happens with that is that because you haven't committed a crime, that center does not have to give you a lawyer by law. They don't have to give you access to a phone or a phone call, obviously, or pay for it. And the third one is they don't have to give you access to visitation. So if you are detained there and you are poor or you don't have any means and you didn't have a wallet by the time that they detained you, and you cannot afford to bribe some people in there, well, guess what? It is very likely that years pass and you never called anyone that was waiting for you. And that happens every day and every year in the United States of America. Most important thing, it is by law. There is an agreement between a lot mayors, a lot of mostly different towns, little towns that make a deal with these big corporations that own the immigration detention system. Very similar to the prison situation. If you've seen 13th, the documentary on Netflix is fantastic and it gives you a good idea of what I'm talking about. But the whole point of this works very similar. there's a deal, there's a commitment, there's a legal binding by which the government has to pay $160 per night to the immigration detention system. So they pay for each one of the people that are supposed to be there, accordingly to, to a bed and food and whatnot. But since it's a private institution and ICE doesn't necessarily have to go in there and check, well, a lot of the civil rights of the people in there are struggling. So how is Christina trying to solve this? Number one, and this is, obviously, yay, she has, and her team has actually just been responsible for changing a law, the first bill in California, to make this illegal, which means no other government official can make a deal with Geo Group or any of the other private institutions that want to open a private immigration detention center in California, which obviously, ideally, will become a domino effect. How does she do this? Is it about Christina? Christina created, unpaid, the largest volunteer network of evangelic women, white women, in the United States. All of them retired, the vast majority of them, who go and knock on the door of an immigration detention center in their town. Say, hi, I'm here to visit Lorena Garcia. And there is a Lorena Garcia in there, and the official opens the list and they see a Lorena Garcia. Well, old lady, okay, you can visit, you can come in. And that has created one of the most important and powerful underground databases, Gestapo style, of who is detained. Because there is no other way by law. Can you imagine that? I mean, I'm a foreigner. This is very crazy to me. Because in my country, if we do that, it's corruption. Here, I didn't know that it was legal, right? So Christina has found a very powerful community of change makers. Christina would have never accomplished anything if she didn't find this very unique group of women around the country, which are change makers. Let's do an exercise. I'm going to prove to you that you are all already what I mean.
Can we ask a question?
Yes.
So this is all a little different than what I would have explained as social entrepreneurs. Because, I know you know, because I have to teach social entrepreneurs that they need to be thinking about the problem, and they need to be solving this problem, but they still need to have an income. So they are not to give their services away for free, nor are they really encouraged to just use volunteers, because that cannot necessarily be sustainable, number one. And number two, if I were that social entrepreneur, what am I going to do as a livelihood if I'm not going to be making money? But I still have this idea that I want to solve this problem, and I still understand business sense. But now, how are you bringing this together as Ashoka, understanding that that woman who started this, somebody has to support her.
Mm-hmm.
And the volunteers, yes, I can understand that we can continuously bring in volunteers, but over a period of time, there needs to be a little bit of an organization, which costs money. There needs to be a little bit of recruitment, which could cost money. There needs to be a little bit of management, which could cost money. So how is that taken care of?
So I agree.
Why don't you kind of repeat, just sort of say what I think that they'll probably hear you.
Can I ask them if they heard me? Can somebody write on the chat? Okay. Well, if not, what Anita said is she understands, that there is and agrees that there is still the component of where do I get the money to sustain myself? Where do I get the money to create an organization that can actually deal with the problem? Where do I get the money to hire people and I cannot live out of volunteers. And yes, you're right. Cristina Fiallo doesn't pay those volunteers, but she has a salary and she has an organization. So it depends. What I'm trying to make a case here is that if you are today, of course, 20 years old or 21 years old, and you're trying to realize, what are you going to do with your life? And you are obsessed about a particular social issue and you want to become a social entrepreneur, I would also advise them, make sure that you have a financial model that is going to help you accomplish it. But not because, let me be very clear, not because I'm interested that that person eats. I'm interested that that person eats because if that person is going to accomplish what that person is trying to accomplish, obviously, I need that person to be healthy and have a level of well-being in order to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. So I would advise exactly what you advise. If I was at a university level and people were aspiring to do this, I would, from zero, think how you're going to eat. Because you are the most important component of this. You need to survive. We, society, need you to eat because you are going to solve this problem. We all care about that. Now, is that a business? I would question that. There's a lot of ways to go about it. And not only business or the for-profit model will give you the best solution. Yes, it is the most common. Yes, it's the most understandable. Actually, it's the most studyable. You can go and study the skills to create a business. You don't necessarily study that much to create an organization that doesn't necessarily have a business. It's much more complex. It's much more challenging. I agree. In some cases, it works. In some cases, honestly, by the time that the social entrepreneur realizes that, shoot, I don't have money for the rent, they have already figured out a lot of the solution. So it is important that if you catch them at an age where they are starting it, I agree with you. If you're starting it right now, think about it. How are you going to get paid? How are you going to get the money? How are you going to make sure that you have the right organization and you have the right resources? But be open. Be open to whatever that model could be. Not always a for-profit will be a solution. And if you decide to do a for-profit, make sure from day zero that you are very convinced what is the ultimate goal of what you're trying to accomplish. Otherwise, we will have, and unfortunately we're having, a massive amount of Tom's Shoes model. And that is not taken. Number one, it's not solving any problems. It's adding to the problems. And more importantly, it's taking spotlight and your ears from the ones that are doing the good job. Because they're sexy and they can pay for it.
Well,
and that is not okay.
I didn't necessarily mean, and I do want to say this to students as a teacher, that I'm not saying, as a matter of fact, I don't encourage a for-profit model. Mm-hmm. There could be a hybrid, but I do not encourage a for-profit model. I encourage you as a social entrepreneur to figure out how you can make money and be a not-for-profit. You could still have a for-profit arm, or you could still have some way of generating revenue. So I'm not necessarily saying you develop a for-profit and then do something good. That's not a social entrepreneur. A social entrepreneur is somebody who is truly trying to solve something, but they're doing it in such a way they're thinking of the business components. Correct. But they are all addressing the problem.
And I've seen brilliant cases coming fresh out of university that have very profitable for-profits that are solving the problem. And to be honest, I want to buy that stuff. Whatever they're buying, I want to buy it because it's going to get them there. And we're not going to talk about another component, which is well-being. So it's not just about how are you going to make your money? How are you going to keep yourself sane? The number one crisis of the top social entrepreneurs in the world is they get to their 60, 65. They never open an account for themselves. They don't have savings. They are tired. They are sick. They are lonely. It's a very common denominator in the top social entrepreneurs in the world, from the top sexy ones, Jimmy Wales, Temple Grandin, to all the way the ones that are just being elected last week. It is the common denominator. So it's not, we don't have enough time to address that one, but keep it in mind. If you are going to solve the problem, we need to make sure that you are fine, more than fine, right? So let's do an exercise. I didn't bring enough booklets for all of you, and you guys online already have it virtually. I'm going to ask for something very weird, usually doesn't happen, and that is silence. I would love for you to read in silence that little booklet that I'm putting in front of you. So let me ask you a question. Forget about what you just read. If I tell you right now, okay, you know, be open. What is something that is really bothering you in terms of a social issue? Think about your country, think about the world. What bothers you? If I give you a magic wand, which one would you pick? Pick one. Mental illness.
Yeah,
Depression.
Work culture balance in Japan.
Sorry?
Work culture balance in Japan.
World culture balance. Oh, work culture balance in Japan. Very specific. What do you think? Silicon Valley. The problem of Silicon Valley. I like that one.
People buy way too many things.
People buying too many things. Poverty. Anita.
I hated that Pomona is, the worst poverty that there is in this whole, and you are sitting right here. That's what I hate.
Thank you, save that one. Food waste. The prison industrial complex, yeah? Education in general.
Of course. It's the source of the solvent.
Another feedback on here is like culturally appropriate mental health education.
Wonderful. So if I tell you we're going to pick one, and we're actually going to spend a year trying to solve it, just one. What happens if I pick education? What happens if I pick mental illness? They're all problems, huge problems in the world. What's missing?
Narrow it down to an area where you could more hone it and focus and come with a solution.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Ali. Well, the whole thing that we've been studying for this 37 years is that the best solutions can only come from those that are profoundly invested in the problem. So if you don't mind me calling you out, when you said mental illness, is there something personal about your life that is connected to mental illness?
Well, I'm studying cognitive science, and I don't know, I was past summer, I was at a place that does research on meditation and well-being, so they're trying to understand it from a neurological perspective. So I think that's really interesting, and I think mental illness really is like neurological. So that's kind of my perspective.
Can I build on that a little bit?
Give me 1 second. I have a point.
Go for it.
Why did you decide to study that? Why did you go to that center? Why are you studying that? What brought you in there?
I'm interested in growth and people's potential, and I think, moderating your emotional well-being, if you can kind of have control of your mental state, then maybe you'll be more resilient and you'll be able to achieve things in that's like not a virtual world, but like a mental reality, and then you have your manifest reality, so you're able to manifest it.
Right.
But it starts in the mind.
So you clearly have a passion for what you're talking about. If I didn't interrupt you and I said, you and I go and grab a coffee, let's talk about mental illness, I bet you it'll be midnight and you and I would be, okay, come on, let's just go to sleep. My point about that is that when we decide that we care about something enough to say, I'm either going to pick a career and I'm going to study social entrepreneurship, or I'm not, but I'll always have this in the back of my mind. And I wish I wouldn't hear my parents and I didn't go to law school. And one day, as soon as I can, I will dedicate myself to this thing that I'm passionate about. What if you could connect passion with something that you profoundly disagree with? Why Japan? Are you from Japan?
No, I'm not, but my grandfather and I have an uncle over there who died from over stress working 80 hours a week. 80 hours a week, just as like regular work, and then he had another 40 hours of overtime. So we worked about 120 hours a week, like on average. And he lived in Japan for 3 years and then killed himself. So after that, I was like, wow, this world is really what it is because of how we put ourselves into it. And I think one of the most interesting things is that Japanese people have the best products, or from what I've seen, they develop the best things. But why? They sacrifice their life, their time, their relationships, their worth. For working men theory, where you're working throughout the day, and then you go drink, you wake up again, work again. Why is that culture allowed?
Right.
Is it because they lost World War II? Is it because
right.
what we've done to them to force capitalism onto them? And I think that is the major issue there, is that Americans are levying that opportunity, and we as Americans have an impact there. I think we should start doing something.
I apologize for smiling. I'm excited. It's personal. It belongs to you. It happened to you. It's part of your family history. You understand it. No matter what you decide to do with your life, it doesn't matter, right? If it's money, no money, it's personal. And when you connect personal, family, blood, passion, then you're onto something. Then if I introduce you to a social entrepreneur that is fighting that issue, would you be interested in being the social entrepreneur that came up with it? I don't think so. What you would be interested in is let me help you. Let me see how you're solving it. Let me jump in there. Not as a volunteer, not as an intern, as whatever you want to call it. I'm passionate about what you're doing. And if you're not doing it the way that I think you should be doing it, then I have something innovative here. So maybe, nice to meet you. Maybe you want to talk with your colleague over here and create something interesting about consumerism and where it comes from, right? And maybe there's a collaboration going on in the room. So my whole point, and sorry for not allowing you to jump in, my whole point to this and what you just read through, and you made it very easy for me to do this exercise, is, to be honest, this world, we're in a hurry. What is happening to this world is far more than the crisis that we've been listening recently. It is not going to get better until we all decide to make it better. And I'm not talking about political, I'm not talking about voting. I'm talking about a responsibility that makes a connection. I'm not talking, we are no longer in the times where, I'm going to go to Africa and I'm going to help the poor. That didn't work. We tried that as a society and that did not work. We made things worse. We are living times smarter than that. There is a level of evolution. And in that level of evolution, there's a very different chip. And again, we didn't make it up. We as an organization, forget about Ashoka, we didn't make it up. We just had the capacity to study the guys that were coming up with the best solutions to the problems. They taught us that there's only one way that this world is going to get much better. And it is when we actually connect our passion, our personal understanding, our love, our own stories to what we want to use our time and effort and resources. Just make that connection. What do I have What do I really care about? Connect them with whatever you do with your lives. Just start making those connections. Number one, you're going to feel tremendously happier with your life. There's going to be a level of adrenaline there and euphoria that you're going to get addicted to it, and yay. But more importantly, we will start seeing a world where there will be more problem solvers than problems, which is clearly not where we are living right now. No matter how many universities, no matter how many social entrepreneurs Ashoka finds or Skoll finds, it's not going to be enough. There's only one way. And to be honest, again, one of the biggest problems that we're facing is that this conversation, this language, this opportunity that certain people have to sit down on a Thursday afternoon under a roof and talk about how are we going to change the world is a privileged one. We have to change that. Because again, the solutions don't come from those that haven't suffered the problem. The solutions come from the problem. And that is a great opportunity. Great opportunity. If I am the one that is suffering, and I'm not talking about poverty. I'm not talking that having a roof is the privilege. There is a privilege to all of the combination of we're now sitting here. Well, those that aren't sitting here, if they are suffering or if they are dealing with a certain issue, which we all are in our own ways, if they don't understand that they, and only they, which is everyone, have the capacity to change things, then we're going to run out of time. And I think we're running out of time.
And we have time. We're okay.
We're okay. So let me make a connection to where can you get more ideas? Where can you find someone else that is doing something similar that you're already interested in? What's going on in well-being, et cetera, et cetera. I'll give you some ideas so you can take practicality in this. And you don't, oh, this was very inspiring, yay, but what do I do tomorrow? A, you have access to a very large today, probably 20 years ago it wasn't that easy, 10 years ago it wasn't that easy. Today it's very easy to read and find out and research who is coming up with the best solutions. I mean, some of you are going to a university that's specific about social entrepreneurship. So you have access to examples. But more importantly, I want you to reread this exercise that you just read. Do it again. Rethink it. Why do I care so much about this? What is my personal story? What resources do I have? What do I have in my hands that today I can start crafting, doing? I know that this guy's going to try to disrupt the situation. I know you're going to do it. I know it. But to be honest, it's not about you. How many change makers are you going to find? How are you going to make sure that there's an army of change makers willing to fight this fight with you?
So I'd like to suggest something that it's kind of, you may not want to do. Let's hear Ali's, what he's doing, to see how you think he can then expand that into something bigger than what he's actually doing. And he's doing some really cool things, but just think in terms of the bigger, because there's more than just people in Riverside that are dealing with the same problem that Ali's talking about.
So Ali, please, but help us in one way. First, explain to me, as short as you can, what's the problem?
The problem is there is a heavy mental and social problem
Where am I?
in the Muslim community.
Okay.
In the United States.
In the United States.
In the Muslim community, can you guys hear? Do I know if they can hear? Okay. In the Muslim community, yeah. Why don't you come over here?
Put you on the spot. You're welcome. No problem. Don't mind doing that at all.
Thank you.
Find out your name. No.
This is Ali.
Hello. I'm put here on the spot by my mentor. Actually, women tour. I'd like to use that
There
term.
you go.
Yeah. So the problem, it is more specific and tailored to a certain community. It is a social and mental problem. When you walk down the street right now and you see a hungry person, you might reach out and give him $1 and you buy him a lunch. But if you see a person, maybe he has a mental problem, you maybe walk away from that person. So this is a hidden problem in a lot of community, and a lot of individual has to deal with it. So I came also from a family that, not your typical family. I lost my father when I was very young. Each time I tell this story, I get very emotional.
It's part of it.
And so I felt it is forming an organization that it helps, the entire family with their challenges. And because they are in the different environment with more challenges in a way that they are not acquainted with, so they needed some resources that could help them to deal with these challenges. So I formed this organization. It's called Muslim Family Foundations. Our logo, it is the fathers and the mothers surrounding their children and protect them from the environment and others. So I don't know if you have any question for me.
How are you dealing with the problem? I do. So I understand the problem. What are you doing about it?
What we're doing about it, we put in a team of volunteers and, of socials and what is the word I'm looking for? Psychologists and others to give that service, provide that service to whomever needed. So that's going to be our team by referral.
How do you make, how is it sustainable? How many people do you have? What's the plan?
So the plan we have a team, and we have part of our team sitting here. I don't want to point,
Calling everybody.
Leslie, she joined our team. And as of right now, we are all volunteers, and we're contributing personally to the causes and to the education program. We hold an annual event around April. It's called Muslim Symposium, Annual Family Symposium, sorry. And the goal of that, it is to provide educational aspect of it. At the same time, we have resources available on that day to handle questions or any things need to be discussed privately too.
What is the actual problem that you're addressing? What is the short statement of what is that problem that the foundation is addressing?
Well, we're dealing with a situation that is really not clear even to us, because immigrant, they usually don't speak about their mental and health problems, so they are afraid and concerned about the stigma that they have to deal with. So we have to go to the problem and find those who's dealing with it and bring the solution to them.
I love it.
Thank you.
That is perfect, Ali. To one point. When there's passion, when it's personal, people as humans, we tend to immediately do something. Remember?
Correct.
So if I see a child starving, I'm not going to just pass by and hopefully the kid starves. And no, I'm human. There's an immediate level of empathy that we were talking about. You have stepped further, which is, I don't have the solution to that child starving. I don't have necessarily, or I don't know the complex solution, or I don't even comprehend the problem. Instead of me deciding what the problem is and answering your question, this is the problem. Well, you know what? I don't know it. I'm going to ask the people that are suffering the problem to come up with a solution. There was an exercise at Sequoia School, and the most famous issue that middle school would say is a problem, they would say homelessness. And every time that I tell them is, okay, so let's explore the ideas on how to solve the problem of homelessness. It is very, like in the first 2 minutes, at least 2 or 3, no matter what their age, no matter what their maturity, why don't we ask them? If you do the same exercise with adults, it can take an hour. And nobody says, why don't we ask them? Why don't we ask a homeless, what do they want? What do they need? Why are you homeless? How would you solve your problem? So may I encourage
Sure. of course.
Ali and the Muslim Family Community Foundation
Yes.
to think as your problems, the people that are suffering this problem, as the change makers of the problem.
Yes.
When you ask them the question, steal one of those, bring it with them,
Okay.
bring it to them. Encourage them to say, how would you solve your problem? How would you solve that? And if it's going to be hard, there's going to be a lot of conversations that we probably as humans don't want to hear. But I bet you that is probably going to get you to a place where you are going to be very happy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let me close this down by talking about what we're specifically doing inside the United States of America. Of course, Ashoka is a global organization. We're all over the place. This 3,300 social entrepreneurs are all over the place. We also have a global community of universities, which we call Changemaker Campus. Claremont McKenna is one of them. Basically, we're creating a global community of educators, institutions, K through 12, that agree that is far more important. I mean, just imagine if you go, the first time that you go to school, instead of a teacher thinking about your SAT, instead of a teacher thinking about math and geography and history, the number one priority in that institution of education that is in charge of your future, what they care, priority number one, is that you practice empathy. Priority number two, you practice collaboration and teamwork. Priority number 3 or 4, creativity. Why? For what? For the good of all. That's the component. Without the for the good of all, it's nothing. It's empty. Empathy for what? It's for the good of all, for that action. Now we're not crazy. When we started talking about this, guess what? We open up a door, and here you go. There's a global community growing and growing and growing of educators, principals, institutions, deans, presidents, et cetera, in the education community that are saying, enough. It's not about math. We did that. It's not about history. It's not about a score. It's not about an exam. If we don't know how to play in teams, if we don't know how to understand our neighbor, if we are not empathetic with ourselves, we are screwed. As a society, we will not survive. That's it. It's obvious. It's too obvious. So if the education system, wherever that is, informal or formal, whichever little place of the world, if that institution doesn't teach you that, you should be angry at that institution. Because those are the basics of your survival. Thank God, there's a lot there, and there's a lot happening. All right, what happens in the United States way before Mr. Trump appeared? We realized that we, as one of the only 4 top organizations in the world that are specifically focused on this, on social entrepreneurship and changing the world, we realized that the vast majority of the social entrepreneurs in a country like this one are situated in 4 main coastal cities. Again, Trump wasn't even in the conversation. They're in 4 main coastal cities. They're white, they're male, and they come from Ivy League universities. Now, someone could say, so what? Well, for us, that is way wrong. Just from the principle, forget about the kumbaya, just from the principle of, if the best solutions come from those that are suffering the problems, why is the majority of the top social entrepreneurs in this country not coming from the problem? There's something wrong. So we have made a commitment. We're going to make sure, well, we started this 2 years ago, and then obviously the political situation kind of really pushed it as an urgency to find social entrepreneurs and encourage change making in all of those places that it's not fancy, it's not sexy, and it's not in the 4 main cities in this country. And hopefully, they're not just white male from Ivy League education. So I'm going to pass around the recent, if you could just pass that booklet around, that is the recent elected community of Ashoka Fellows in the United States, and you will see how we're turning that around. You're talking about solutions from all over the place. We found our second Native American social entrepreneur in the country, and guess what? When we found that person, and the first one, the first reaction was, where were you? I've been a social entrepreneur for 10 years. You weren't just looking. You weren't looking. I've been here. You could have been supporting me and my organization way 10 years ago. So we realized that, yes, we were on spot. This is exactly what this organization should be doing in the context of the United States. We are going to change that. And so if you know of anyone, of any type, of any class, of any space, in any part of the country that you think we should be talking to, send it to me. If you have questions, if you want to dig in, I have a lot of ideas for well-being. I have a lot of ideas for Japan. I have a lot of ideas for all of you. But more importantly, those ideas don't belong to me. They're in there. You can search for them, but also I'm here. If you want to talk to me, there's my email will be provided to everybody. So you can please feel free to text me and ask questions, and most importantly, challenge me.
What do the fellows actually, how do you recognize them? Or what do they receive? Or what kind of support? What happens with the Ashoka fellows?
How much
By the way,
how much
LA
time do I-
is a big area too.
Right, 7 minutes. So in the United States, we have over 250 social entrepreneurs. In LA area and surroundings, we have around 11, if I'm not mistaken. That woman, Cristina Fialo, that I was talking about, she's here. She's located in Santa Monica. When we think we have found one of these individuals, we invite them to go through a very thorough process. Some people criticize the process. It's a very thorough process. It can take years. But once they have passed that process, they become an Ashoka Fellow, they receive 3 things. One, which is not mentioned anywhere, but it's very important, is the moral support. The vast majority of these individuals are people that consider themselves crazy, or their families consider them crazy, and here comes an organization and you say, yes, you're crazy, and you belong to a global family of crazy people. So that is very important. Number 2, if they need money, and we're not talking about a big amount of money, we're not a foundation, and a lot of those other are foundations, we will support them. And we will support them in a way that you rarely see, which means we give them a stipend that is completely and absolutely free. We do not ask for any questions. They can do whatever they want with our money. We are so sure that the individual that has passed that process has the right ethical fiber that we don't care what they do with that money. And we're talking about a very small amount of money, around $3,000 per month for 3 years, and depends on the country. And more importantly, once you become an Ashoka Fellow, you're an Ashoka Fellow for life. That means we will be back behind you for the rest of your life. And that means if you need security, which unfortunately happens very often, we will provide security. You need a lawyer, we will try to find you a lawyer. You need a spotlight, we will try to find you a spotlight. You need to get some financial backup, you need to meet some top people, we will do our best to get you whatever you need, because at the end of the day, what we're in here for is to make sure that you accomplish what you're so obsessed with accomplishing. So that is what an Ashoka Fellow is and whatnot. And the last thing is that we finally published a magazine. I brought only 2. My apologies. It's the first print of 5,000, and we already have them all over the place. If you actually go to the Ashoka U Exchange, which is the event that gathers all of the universities and students from all the world that care about change making, everybody will receive one of those. I only brought 2, and basically what this magazine is doing, it's not a magazine about Ashoka. It's actually a journey throughout the country with our eyes. If we give you our glasses, this is how this country the United States of America will look like. That's the whole point that we're trying to make. And it will have different sessions. I believe we're doing 4 states by magazine, by edition. So as you can imagine, we're going to have many editions, each one touching a different state. So with that, thank you so much. Thank you for not falling asleep, for paying attention, for being interested. Thank you for hosting. Thank you for inviting me, Anita. And I really, really, really hope that this doesn't end here. I'm pretty sure for your eyes, it won't.
Do you have a way that people can contact you?
Yes, I mentioned my email can be given to anybody. Sounds bueno? All right.
Any questions?
Oh yeah, sorry. Any question?
Good question. I'm actually not from the school. I'm from the Impact LA. I came out to school.
Lovely.
And I just wanted to see what you guys are doing. But I also wanted to know, what is your role in all this? What do you do on a consistent basis, like your day in and day out? How are you making impact?
Okay, so I am the director of the Ashoka Support Network. And basically what that is a global community. I'm the director just for the United States, but it's a global community of successful business people, entrepreneurs, professionals that agree with our concept of change, that agree with our framework, that agree with what we're trying to do, and they want to help, that they don't want to help just by writing a check. They want to use what they have learned, they want to use their expertise in really creating top impact. And basically, I help them navigate the world of Ashoka. I help them connect their resources with the gaps inside the world of social entrepreneurship.
And Net Impact could really enjoy her connection with you and Ellen. Because we did too.
So yeah, that is a tiny little bit of what I do, but that's my title. That's not all what I do, but that's good enough. Thank you. Thank you so much.